It was a bright morning at the town's community school. The auditorium buzzed with excitement, echoing with the chatter and laughter of students. They had gathered for the annual talent show, a day everyone looked forward to. Some came to perform, others came just to watch, and a few came to gossip and laugh at whoever dared to step on that stage unprepared. In that noisy hall sat a quiet girl at the back row, her hands folded tightly on her lap, her eyes focused on the shiny black piano standing at the center of the stage. She wasn't the type to draw attention. In fact, most people barely noticed her. She walked through the school halls every day with her eyes lowered, holding her worn-out backpack and keeping to herself. People knew her as the quiet one, the girl who didn't talk much, the one who always sat alone during lunch. She wasn't unpopular because she did something wrong. She just didn't fit in with the loud, confident crowd that ruled the place. That day, as the list of performers was read out loud, a few heads turned when they heard her name. Whispers started spreading instantly. Some students looked surprised, others amused. "She's performing?" One boy laughed. "What's she going to do, read a poem?" Another joked. A few girls sitting together exchanged looks and covered their mouths, trying not to laugh too loudly. Nobody expected anything serious. The teacher hosting the event called her name again, asking her to come forward. The quiet girl stood up slowly. Her heart raced in her chest. Her fingers felt cold even though the room was warm. She took a deep breath and started walking toward the stage. The sound of her shoes tapping against the floor felt louder than ever. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back, some curious, some doubtful, and a few mocking. When she reached the piano, the laughter grew faintly louder. The instrument looked far too grand for her small frame. She hesitated for a second, staring at the black and white keys that gleamed under the stage lights. Her reflection looked back at her, nervous, shy, but determined. She gently pulled the piano bench and sat down. From the audience, someone whispered, "She doesn't even look like she knows what she's doing." Another voice said, "This is going to be funny." The girl heard every word, though she pretended not to. Her hands trembled as she lifted them over the keys, her fingers hovering in midair. For a moment, she thought about standing up and walking away. But something deep inside her whispered to stay. She remembered her mother's voice, louder, soft, patient, full of love. Her mother used to say, "When you play, don't think about the people watching. Just listen to your heart." Those words echoed in her mind, calming her nerves a little. She closed her eyes and took another slow breath. The auditorium was still buzzing with low laughter and whispers. Some students had their phones out, ready to record what they assumed would be a disaster. But she didn't see any of that. In her mind, she was somewhere else, in a small room years ago, with her mother sitting beside her on a rickety chair, teaching her to press one key at a time on a broken keyboard they found at a flea market. Back then, her mother couldn't afford real lessons, but she had a gift for music. She used to hum along while showing her how to find melodies with her fingers. The keyboard was old, missing a few keys, and the sound sometimes cracked, but to them it was magical. Music became their secret world, a place where they didn't need much, only love and time. After her mother passed away, that world fell silent. For months, the girl couldn't bring herself to touch the keys. The emptiness felt too heavy. But one evening, she found herself sitting alone in the school's music room, staring at the piano. It looked untouched, almost forgotten. She pressed one note, then another, and the sound filled the room softly, like a whisper from the past. From that day, she began returning every night after everyone left. She practiced in secret, teaching herself through old books, videos, and memory. She wasn't perfect. Sometimes her fingers slipped. Sometimes the notes sounded wrong. But every mistake became part of her journey. She didn't have fancy lessons, expensive instruments, or anyone to guide her. All she had was her mother's memory and her own will to keep going. And now, sitting on that stage, all those hours came back to her. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to play. For her mother, for herself, for the promise she once made to never stop trying. The teacher nodded from the side of the stage, giving her the signal to start. The microphone picked up the faint sound of someone giggling in the audience. She ignored it and placed her hands gently on the piano. The first note came out uneven, soft and unsure. A few students snickered. She could feel her heart pounding, but she didn't stop. She took another breath and pressed the next few keys, building a slow rhythm. Then something changed. Her hands began to move more confidently. The sound grew fuller, smoother. Her fingers glided across the keys as if they were finally remembering what they were meant to do. The scattered laughter faded into silence. The melody started telling a story, one of pain, loss, and quiet strength. The audience didn't expect it. They leaned forward, surprised at the sudden beauty filling the room. The girl didn't look up, but if she had, she would have seen faces frozen in shock. The same people who mocked her were now speechless. Her music wasn't flashy or perfect, but it was pure. Each note carried emotion, gentle but powerful. It reached people in a way words couldn't. The teacher standing near the curtain had tears in her eyes. She knew this wasn't just a performance. It was something deeper, a piece of someone's soul being shared openly for the first time. The girl kept playing, lost in her world, unaware of how the audience had transformed. When she finally finished the last note, her hands rested on the piano. The sound lingered in the air for a few seconds, soft and echoing. The silence afterward was heavier than the noise before. Nobody clapped right away. It was as if everyone needed a moment to process what just happened. She slowly lifted her head. Her chest rose and fell as she caught her breath. The room that once mocked her now sat completely still. Then from somewhere in the back, one person started clapping. Another followed. Soon the entire auditorium erupted into applause. She blinked in surprise, unsure if it was real. Her heart felt light, almost trembling again, but this time from joy. For the first time, she saw admiration in their eyes instead of mockery. Some students even stood up, clapping harder. The teacher walked to the stage, her smile warm and proud. "That was beautiful," she said softly, so only the girl could hear. The girl didn't say much. She just nodded slightly, her lips curving into a small smile. She didn't need words. The music had already said everything. As she walked back to her seat, people moved aside, making space for her. No one laughed this time. Some whispered to each other, saying things like, "I didn't know she could play like that," and "That was amazing." Others just stared quietly, still lost in thought. She sat down again in her corner seat, clutching her hands together, still shaking from the adrenaline. The applause faded and the next performance began, but she barely noticed. She stared down at her lap, replaying the moment in her mind. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She felt proud, not because people clapped, but because she stayed true to herself when no one believed she could. Later that day, when the show ended, a few students came up to her. One girl said, "Hey, that was really good." Another boy added, "You surprised everyone out there." She smiled shyly, thanking them. It wasn't much, but it meant the world. As she walked home under the setting sun, her heart felt light. She didn't think about the laughter anymore. All she remembered was the sound of the piano, her mother's voice in her memory, and the way her fingers danced across the keys like they belonged there. That night, she sat by the window of her small room, looking at the stars. She didn't have a grand plan or dream of fame. She only knew one thing: she would keep playing no matter what anyone said. Because music was more than sound to her. It was the voice she never had the courage to use. And somewhere in her heart, she felt her mother smiling too. The next morning, the school was still buzzing about what had happened the day before. People who never noticed her before were suddenly talking about her. Some called it unbelievable. Others said they had goosebumps when she played. In the hallways, she could hear her name whispered from one group to another. Some students smiled when she passed, while others avoided her eyes, embarrassed that they had laughed at her. It felt strange, like the same place she walked through every day had changed overnight. She didn't quite know how to feel about it. She wasn't used to attention. For years, she had blended into the background like a shadow. Now people were noticing her, and she wasn't sure if she liked it or not. She wanted to be proud, but she also wanted things to stay simple. Fame, even the smallest kind, felt uncomfortable to her. When she entered the classroom, the noise dropped slightly. A few people smiled at her. One girl gestured for her to sit nearby, which had never happened before. She gave a shy nod and took her seat quietly. The teacher, who had seen her performance, gave her a warm look before starting the lesson. Everything felt a little lighter, but she could still feel the weight of all those eyes. At lunch, she sat under the big tree near the playground, like she always did. She liked the quiet. It was her place to think, away from the crowd. But this time, she wasn't alone for long. A few classmates came over holding their lunchboxes, asking if they could sit with her. It surprised her so much that she didn't answer right away. One of them said, "We just wanted to say, yesterday was amazing. I didn't know you could play like that." Another added, "It didn't even sound like a school performance, it was like something from a movie." She smiled softly and thanked them, her voice quiet but sincere. The conversation was awkward, at first, but soon they started chatting about simple things: teachers, homework, the weekend plans. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't invisible anymore, but deep down she knew this moment of attention might not last. She had seen it before, how people moved from one thing to another quickly. Still, it felt nice to be seen for something she loved, not for what she lacked. That evening, when she reached home, the small apartment was quiet as usual. The walls were thin and the furniture was old, but it was the only place she could call home. Her father worked late shifts at a local factory, and she often spent her evenings alone. She took off her shoes, placed her school bag on the chair, and sat by the window where the last light of the sunset touched the curtains. She didn't have a piano at home, just the same broken keyboard her mother had found years ago. Its sound was uneven, but to her it still felt like a friend. She plugged it in, adjusted the wire, and pressed a few keys. The tune wasn't smooth, but the feeling in her heart was the same. As she played softly, her mind went back to the memories she rarely spoke of. Her mother used to work as a part-time cleaner in the same school. Every evening, after cleaning the music room, she would sit beside the little keyboard they kept in a corner and play soft melodies. Her mother had a gentle smile, even on her hardest days. She would hum along, saying music helped her forget worries. When she was younger, she didn't understand why her mother looked sad sometimes. Only later did she realize the struggles her mother carried: bills to pay, health problems, and still trying to give her a better future. Even when things got tough, her mother always made time to teach her something small on the keys. "Music doesn't judge," her mother once said. "Even if your heart feels heavy, it listens and understands." Those words stayed with her forever. When her mother passed away, everything in her world fell apart. The small apartment felt empty, the air heavier. The keyboard sat silent for months, collecting dust. Her father tried his best to take care of her, but grief had changed him too. They both moved like shadows in the same space, speaking little, just surviving each day. It was one evening, when she was walking home from school, that she saw the light in the music room. She stopped and peeked through the window. The piano stood there untouched, waiting. Something inside her pulled her in. She found the door open, and for the first time in months, she sat in front of the piano again. When she pressed a key, the sound made her cry. It was as if the memories she had buried came rushing back all at once. From that night onward, she began returning there secretly. She stayed late, sometimes until the school lights turned off. She practiced using her phone's flashlight, afraid someone would catch her. At first, she could barely remember the notes, but slowly, her fingers started remembering the rhythm her mother had taught her. Each song was like a letter to her mother, each note a word she couldn't say out loud. She didn't tell anyone about those nights. It was her secret, a space between her and her memories. Sometimes she would whisper to herself while playing, imagining her mother listening nearby. Those nights were quiet, but healing. And though no one saw the effort behind her music, those silent hours shaped her more than anything else in life. The night after the talent show, she sat again at her small keyboard. Her heart was full, but not because of the applause. It was because for the first time she had shared her mother's music with others. She had let the world hear the sound of her heart. As she played, she heard a knock on the door. It was her father, home earlier than usual. He looked tired, but there was a faint smile on his face. "I saw your performance," he said softly. She looked up, surprised. "Someone showed me a video," he continued. "You played beautifully." She didn't know what to say. Her father wasn't a man of many words, but the pride in his eyes said enough. He sat down beside her and listened for a while as she played again, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. For the first time in a long time, the silence between them didn't feel heavy. The next day, when she returned to school, something unexpected happened. The teacher announced that her performance had been selected for a local competition. The class clapped, some cheering louder than others. She sat there stunned. She had never competed in anything before. The thought of performing in front of strangers made her nervous, but the teacher's encouraging smile gave her strength. That evening, she went to the music room after school again. The air smelled faintly of old wood and polish. She sat in front of the piano and ran her fingers across the keys, thinking of the journey that brought her here. It wasn't about trophies or fame. It was about continuing what her mother had started. As she began to play, she noticed someone standing at the door. It was one of her classmates, the same one who had laughed the loudest during the talent show. He looked awkward, unsure of what to say. She paused and turned to him. He cleared his throat and said, "Hey, I just wanted to say sorry for laughing that day. I didn't know." She gave a small smile and nodded. "It's okay," she said simply. He smiled back, a little embarrassed, and asked if he could listen while she practiced. She agreed. As she played, he sat quietly by the door, watching. The melody filled the room again, gentle and warm. For the first time, someone else was witnessing her late-night world, the place she once kept hidden. When she finished, he clapped softly. "That's really something," he said, searching for the right words. She nodded again, feeling lighter than before. Maybe forgiveness, just like music, had its own melody. As the days passed, more students began to see her differently, not as the quiet girl in the corner, but as someone strong, someone who carried her pain and turned it into something beautiful. The local competition was just weeks away, and she practiced harder than ever. Sometimes she doubted herself, but then she would remember her mother's voice. "Don't think about the people watching. Just listen to your heart." She knew now that those words weren't just about music, they were about life. And as she sat before the piano every evening, she could feel herself growing braver, not just as a musician, but as a person who had finally learned to let her heart be heard. The day of the local music competition arrived faster than she had expected. She woke up early, her stomach fluttering with nerves. She didn't sleep well the night before, her mind racing with thoughts about the performance ahead. She sat by her window for a few minutes, staring at the sky as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains. It was a calm morning, but inside her it felt like a storm. She had been practicing for weeks, running through her piece over and over in the quiet music room after school. Each day she reminded herself why she was doing this, not for applause or recognition, but to honor the memory of her mother, to prove to herself that she could overcome fear and hesitation. She took a deep breath and tried to calm her nerves. "I can do this," she whispered to herself. "I just need to let the music speak." Her father was already awake when she came down to the small kitchen. He had made some tea and bread, and though he didn't say much, his presence was comforting. He handed her the cup with a small, quiet smile. "Good luck," he said simply. She nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. His support was silent, but stronger than any words he could have said. On the way to the competition, she held her small bag tightly, thinking about the students in her school who had doubted her. She remembered the laughter, the whispers, the mocking looks in the auditorium. She didn't feel anger this time. She felt calm determination. Those moments were part of her journey, part of what had made her stronger. She had practiced countless hours, faced her fears, and now she was ready to show what she had learned. The venue was a large hall, far bigger than the school auditorium. She had never seen so many seats and so many people gathered for a single event. The stage was polished, the piano grand and shiny, and bright lights highlighted the area where the performers would stand. She felt a shiver of nervousness run through her. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, but she reminded herself to focus on the music and not the crowd. Backstage, she noticed other contestants warming up. Some had their instruments tuned perfectly, their hands moving with confident ease. Some had come with full orchestras, while others carried sheet music and expensive instruments. She felt a small pang of insecurity, but pushed it away. She didn't have a coach or a team. She had only her memory, her practice, and her determination. That had to be enough. The host called her name. She took a deep breath and walked toward the stage. The lights shone bright in her eyes, making the crowd almost invisible. She adjusted the piano bench and sat down, her hands trembling slightly above the keys. A moment of doubt crossed her mind. What if she forgot everything? What if her fingers didn't move as she wanted them to? Then she closed her eyes for a brief second, and in her mind she saw the music room at school. She remembered the quiet nights, the dim light, the soft melodies she had played when no one was watching. She remembered her mother's smile, her voice, her gentle words. That memory anchored her, and she opened her eyes with renewed focus. The first note rang out. It was soft, hesitant at first, but as she continued, it gained strength. The music flowed naturally, carrying the story of her life, of struggle, of loneliness, of hope. The audience, initially quiet, began to lean in, sensing the depth of what they were hearing. She didn't play for them, but somehow the emotion she put into every note reached them. Her fingers moved with precision, each chord full of feeling. She remembered the nights spent learning without guidance, the countless mistakes she had corrected alone. All those moments, which had once felt like struggles, now became her strength. The audience could feel it too, even if they didn't know the story behind the music. A few minutes in, she noticed people wiping their eyes. Some students in the audience covered their mouths in surprise, unable to believe the sound that was coming from her hands. The judges, who had expected another simple performance, exchanged looks, astonishment written across their faces. She felt a quiet satisfaction, not from their surprise, but from knowing that her music had touched them. She closed her eyes again, letting herself feel the melody fully. The music was no longer just notes on a page. It was a conversation between her heart and the piano. Each note carried a memory, a feeling, a piece of herself she had kept hidden for so long. She played with everything she had, letting the instrument speak when words could not. When the final chord resonated through the hall, there was a brief, heavy silence. Nobody moved. The music lingered in the air, wrapping the audience in a soft embrace. Then slowly applause began, first from the front row, then spreading across the hall until the entire room erupted into clapping and cheering. People were on their feet, some with tears in their eyes, some cheering and whistling. She didn't expect such a reaction. She opened her eyes, surprised at the sight of the crowd standing and clapping. Her chest felt light, her hands still resting on the piano keys. She realized in that moment that she had done more than play music. She had shared her story, her struggle, and her heart. That was more important than winning or losing. The judges approached her with smiles, praising her performance. They asked how long she had been playing, what inspired her, and if she had received any lessons. She answered honestly, her voice calm but proud. "I learned mostly on my own," she said softly. "I practiced every night after school. Music has always been my way of expressing myself." They nodded, impressed by her dedication and natural talent. One judge said, "It's rare to see someone who can play like that without formal training. You have a gift, and you have worked very hard for it." She smiled faintly, feeling a quiet pride. It wasn't just about the praise. It was about the fact that her journey, her effort, and her love for music had finally been recognized. After leaving the stage, she walked back to the waiting area, her heart still racing. Other contestants congratulated her, some with genuine smiles, others with awe. One of them, who had been confident and competitive, approached her and said, "I didn't expect that. You were incredible." She nodded politely, still processing everything that had just happened. Her father was waiting outside the hall when she came out. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of relief and happiness she had never felt before. His support had been her anchor throughout her life, and now it felt stronger than ever. That evening, back at home, she sat by her small keyboard and replayed the piece she had performed. The notes felt different now, as if the experience had added another layer of depth to them. She wasn't the same girl who had walked nervously onto the stage that morning. She had faced her fears, shared her heart, and discovered the power of her own voice. The next few days were filled with messages, compliments, and unexpected attention. People from her school and the community reached out to congratulate her. Some asked if she would perform at local events. Others wanted to hear more of her music. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had always preferred solitude, but now she realized that sharing her music brought joy not just to herself but to others as well. Even with the praise, she remained grounded. She knew this was just one step in a long journey. There would be challenges ahead, more performances and more doubts to overcome. But she felt ready. She had learned that talent was not enough. Courage, perseverance, and passion mattered just as much. Every night she returned to the music room, practicing and refining her skills. She experimented with new melodies, taught herself small techniques from books and videos, and allowed herself to make mistakes without fear. She discovered that music was not about perfection. It was about expression, emotion, and connection. Through it all, she thought of her mother. Every note she played carried a memory, a smile, a piece of advice. She felt her mother's presence guiding her hands, whispering encouragement with every chord. The memory of her mother had been a source of strength all along, and now it felt like a bridge connecting her past to her present. The experience of the competition changed her perspective. She realized that fear and doubt were temporary, but courage and determination could leave a lasting impact. She also learned the value of sharing her story through music, that it could touch hearts, inspire others, and create connections that words could not achieve. And as she sat by the piano each evening, she felt a quiet confidence growing inside her. She knew that whatever challenges came next, she could face them with strength, grace, and the unwavering voice of her own music. The days after the competition were a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. She had experienced applause, recognition, and pride for the first time, but now a new challenge waited: a larger stage, bigger audience, and higher expectations. Invitations to perform at community events began coming in, some from people she had never met. She felt a strange mixture of joy and pressure. The thought of sitting at a piano in front of strangers again made her heart race, but deep inside, she also knew she was ready. One afternoon, she sat in the school music room, alone as always. Her fingers traced the piano keys gently, almost as if remembering old friends. The room smelled faintly of wood polish and sunlight from the open windows. She had come here countless times in the past weeks, but today it felt different. She was preparing for something bigger than a school stage. She needed to be stronger, more confident. As she began playing, her mind wandered to her first days learning music. How hesitant she had been. How the notes once seemed impossible. Every mistake had been a lesson. Every small success a reason to keep going. She remembered nights of frustration, sitting alone in the dimly lit room, sometimes crying when she couldn't get a melody right. But in those moments, she had learned patience and persistence. That struggle had shaped her, and now it gave her strength she could feel in every note she played. The next morning, she received a message from the local event organizer. Her performance was scheduled for a small auditorium downtown, and she would be playing in front of people from the whole town. Some were critics, some were journalists, and many were music lovers she had never met. She felt a flutter of anxiety, but it was different this time. She had faced fear before and had overcome it. On the day of the performance, she wore her usual simple clothes, comfortable and unassuming. She didn't want to distract anyone from the music. Her father walked her to the venue, giving her a reassuring smile. "Just play your heart," he said quietly. She nodded, feeling the familiar calm that his presence always brought. Backstage, she could hear the hum of voices and the rustle of papers. Contestants prepared their instruments, checked their notes, and whispered encouragement to one another. Some had shiny instruments, polished shoes, and confident smiles. She felt a moment of doubt, but then she remembered her mother. She could almost hear her gentle voice telling her, "Focus on what you love, not on what others have." The host called her name, and she stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, the audience vast. Her heart beat quickly, but she took a deep breath and approached the piano. Sitting down, she let her hands hover over the keys for a second, letting her fingers remember the rhythm and melody she had practiced tirelessly. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, thinking of her mother and all the nights she had spent practicing in secret. That memory anchored her. The first notes flowed softly, almost like a whisper. The audience quieted, captivated by the delicate sound. She allowed herself to feel every emotion as she played, the pain of loss, the loneliness of long nights, and the quiet determination that had carried her this far. Each note became a word in her story, each chord a sentence of emotion that the audience could feel even if they didn't understand it fully. As she continued, the music grew richer, more confident. Her fingers moved with ease, telling a story that words could never capture. People in the audience leaned forward, some closing their eyes to absorb the beauty of the sound. The room was filled with a deep, almost reverent silence. She didn't see the faces clearly, but she could feel the energy and attention around her. A few minutes into the performance, she noticed subtle movements in the audience. A tear wiped quickly, a smile forming, a hand gripping the armrest. Her music had reached them. The same music that had once been just a private conversation between her and her mother was now connecting with strangers. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of fulfillment that went beyond applause. When she reached the climax of her piece, the music swelled and carried a deep emotion that seemed to echo through the entire auditorium. Her heart raced with each note, not from fear, but from the joy of expression. She had learned to channel her feelings into sound, letting her fingers speak the words she could not. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and beautiful all at once. As she pressed the final chord, the hall was still. The note lingered in the air, soft and powerful. Then slowly the audience began to clap. One by one, the sound of appreciation grew, until the room was filled with applause, cheers, and whistles. She opened her eyes, startled by the intensity of the reaction. People were standing, some wiping tears, others smiling in awe. She let herself smile for the first time in the performance. Her hands rested on the piano, still trembling slightly from the effort. The music had ended, but its impact remained. The audience had not only listened, they had felt. They had been moved by something pure and real. She realized that this was the true power of music. It could reach hearts, cross boundaries, and touch lives in ways words never could. After she left the stage, people approached her with compliments, questions, and praise. One woman said, "Your music made me feel emotions I haven't felt in years." Another man said, "You have a rare gift and you share it so sincerely." She thanked them quietly, feeling a mix of pride and humility. She had shared a piece of herself, and that connection was more meaningful than anything else. Her father waited for her outside, his eyes shining with pride. He wrapped his arms around her and said, "I always knew you could do this." She leaned into him, feeling the comfort and support she had relied on all her life. In that moment, she realized that her journey wasn't just about music. It was about courage, perseverance, and the bond between her and the people who had loved and guided her. In the days that followed, people continued to talk about her performance. Some asked for recordings, others invited her to local events. She was careful to remain humble, knowing that the attention was not the reason she played. Music was her passion, her connection to her mother, and her way of expressing emotions she couldn't always put into words. The recognition was a bonus, not the goal. She returned to the music room every evening, practicing diligently but also experimenting. She tried new melodies, improvised, and allowed herself to make mistakes without fear. She realized that music was not just about performing perfectly. It was about feeling, learning, and growing. Each note she played became a step forward, a way to explore her own emotions and connect with others. One quiet evening, as she played softly, one of her classmates from school entered the room. He had been quiet during school hours but now stood at the doorway watching her play. She didn't stop but continued with a gentle smile. When she finished, he approached her and said, "I didn't know music could feel like this. It's incredible." She nodded quietly, appreciating the honesty in his words. Her father noticed the change in her as well. She was no longer the quiet, hesitant girl who had avoided attention. She carried herself with quiet confidence, a calm assurance that came from knowing her own strength. She had faced fear, shared her music with strangers, and touched hearts. She had grown not just as a musician, but as a person. Even with the new opportunities and recognition, she remained focused on what mattered most, her music and her connection to her mother's memory. Every note she played was a tribute, every melody a way to express the feelings she carried inside. She realized that true success was not measured by applause or awards, but by the impact one's work had on others and the satisfaction of staying true to oneself. Through these experiences, she also learned patience and resilience. Some days were harder than others. Sometimes she struggled to find the right melody or felt exhausted from practice. But she had learned that persistence and dedication were more important than immediate success. She continued, knowing that each effort brought her closer to her goals and strengthened her confidence. Her music became a bridge, a connection to her past, a voice in the present, and a promise for the future. Each performance, no matter how small, was a chance to share a piece of herself, to express emotions, and to inspire others. She understood that her journey was ongoing, and that every experience, every challenge, and every note was part of a larger story. As she played late into the evening, the room bathed in the soft glow of the lamp, she smiled softly. She was no longer the girl who had once been ridiculed for touching the piano. She had grown, learned, and shared her gift with the world. Her music spoke louder than any words ever could, and she had discovered the true meaning of courage and expression. The applause, recognition, and admiration were beautiful, but what mattered most was the quiet satisfaction that came from knowing she had stayed true to herself, shared her heart, and honored her mother's memory through her music. The months that followed were unlike anything she had ever experienced. After the local competition, word of her talent spread slowly but steadily through the community. People she had never met reached out, praising her music and asking if she would perform at events. Some invitations were for small gatherings, while others were for larger audiences. At first, the attention felt overwhelming, but she reminded herself that music was not about recognition. It was about expression and connection. Her father continued to support her quietly, attending every performance he could, always sitting in the back with a proud smile. He rarely spoke much about her talent, but the way he looked at her said everything. Sometimes she caught him listening from the doorway during practice, a faint tear in his eye, and it reminded her that her journey was shared, not just personal. She also started to meet other young musicians. Some were confident, some shy like her. They practiced together occasionally, sharing tips and techniques. She was surprised to discover how much she enjoyed helping others, teaching small tricks she had learned on her own. She realized that her journey had given her not just skill, but also empathy. She understood the fear and struggle that came with starting something new, and she wanted to encourage others to keep going. One day, she received a letter from a well-known music teacher in the city. The teacher had seen a video of her performance online and wanted to offer her lessons. She read the letter carefully, her hands shaking with excitement. She had never received formal training, and the idea of learning from someone experienced filled her with both joy and nervousness. She thought about her mother and how proud she would have been to see her grow, and she decided to accept the offer. The lessons began after school. At first it was challenging. She was used to teaching herself, and having someone correct her mistakes was uncomfortable. But gradually she learned to appreciate guidance. Her teacher was patient, always encouraging her to explore her own style while refining her technique. Each lesson felt like discovering a new world, and her confidence grew with every session. Even with formal lessons, she never stopped practicing on her own. Late at night, in the quiet of her room or in the music room at school, she would sit and let the piano speak to her. Sometimes she improvised, creating melodies she had never played before. Other times she revisited pieces that reminded her of her mother, adding her own touch, her own emotion to the notes. Each time she played, she felt connected to the past and hopeful for the future. As she grew more confident, she began performing at larger venues. The first time she played in front of a packed hall of strangers, she felt the familiar flutter of nerves. But she remembered all the times she had faced fear and uncertainty. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and let her fingers move over the keys. The music flowed naturally, carrying her story and emotions into the audience. By the time she finished, the hall erupted in applause and cheers. She began to understand that music was more than just sound. It was a language, a way to communicate feelings and experiences that words could never express. Her performances were no longer just about notes and melodies. They were about sharing her heart. People often came up to her afterward, saying how moved they had been, and she realized that she had the power to touch lives in ways she had never imagined. Despite her growing recognition, she remained humble. She never sought fame, and she never played to impress. Each performance was personal, a continuation of her journey, a tribute to her mother, and a gift to those who listened. She learned to balance practice, lessons, and schoolwork, understanding that discipline was essential, but passion was what truly gave her music life. There were also challenges along the way. Some performances did not go as planned. Occasionally, her fingers would slip, or she would forget a note. Audiences could be critical, and some people didn't understand her style. but she learned to accept mistakes as part of learning. She remembered her mother's words, "Music listens to your heart. Mistakes are just steps toward understanding." Every error became an opportunity to grow stronger, to be more precise, and to express more deeply. Through all of this, she discovered her own voice both in music and in life. She began to speak more openly at school, sharing small thoughts and participating in conversations she had once avoided. Her confidence grew not from recognition alone, but from understanding her own worth and abilities. She realized that fear often came from doubt in herself, and that courage was simply moving forward despite that doubt. Her story began to inspire others quietly. Students who had once overlooked her now watched her with respect, and some even approached her for advice. She became a symbol of perseverance, proof that dedication, patience, and love for what you do could overcome obstacles. She never boasted, never demanded attention, but her actions spoke louder than words. One evening, she was invited to perform at a community event celebrating local talent. The hall was full, filled with families, friends, and music lovers. As she sat at the grand piano, she felt a calm excitement. This time she was not nervous because she feared judgment. She was excited because she could share her music with people who appreciated it, people who were open to the emotion behind each note. She played with the depth of experience she had gained over the past year. Each melody told a story of struggle, hope, and resilience. The audience was silent, completely absorbed. She could feel their attention, their emotion, but she didn't let it distract her. She let the music carry itself, flowing naturally from her heart to her fingers and into the ears and hearts of everyone listening. When she finished, the applause was overwhelming. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Some wiped away tears and others smiled broadly. She felt a wave of joy and fulfillment wash over her. She realized that music had become more than a talent or hobby. It had become her voice, her connection to the world, and her way of giving back. In the following months, she continued to perform, study, and practice. She balanced schoolwork, music lessons, and her growing reputation with care. Her father remained her constant support, attending performances and encouraging her quietly. She often thought of her mother, imagining her smiling with pride at how far she had come. She also took time to teach younger students who were struggling with music. She shared her experiences, encouraging them to practice patiently, to trust their instincts, and to find joy in the process. She understood the power of guidance because she had experienced the difference that encouragement could make. Watching others grow gave her a deep sense of satisfaction. Her life changed in small ways too. People in her community began to recognize her on the street, asking about her performances, praising her talent, and sometimes sharing their own stories about music. She didn't seek attention, but she appreciated the connections. She realized that her journey was about more than her own growth. It was about inspiring and uplifting others through the universal language of music. Through all the recognition and opportunities, she remained grounded. She never forgot the small music room at school where she had spent countless nights practicing alone. She never forgot her mother's gentle guidance and love. Every performance, every lesson, every note she played was a tribute to that journey. To the quiet girl who once trembled in front of a piano, and to the determination that had carried her forward. Even on days when she felt tired or unsure, she would sit at the piano and let the music remind her of why she started. Each melody was a reflection of her growth, her courage, and her ability to transform challenges into beauty. She had learned that the heart behind the music mattered more than the applause, that sincerity and passion were far more powerful than perfection. Her story continued to spread quietly but steadily. She was invited to participate in more events, to collaborate with other musicians, and to share her story with larger audiences. Each step forward reinforced the lesson she had learned long ago. That talent alone was not enough, but when combined with dedication, courage, and love, it could inspire and transform lives. Through it all, she never lost sight of the simple joy that music had always brought her. Even with larger audiences and higher expectations, she returned to the quiet moments, playing for herself, remembering her mother, and finding peace in the notes that had been her companions through so many challenges. Her life became a balance of performance, learning, teaching, and personal reflection. She discovered that the world could be kind, that people could be moved by sincerity, and that one person's determination could create ripples far beyond what they imagined. She learned to trust herself, to embrace both success and failure, and to let her heart guide her through every note she played. And so, the girl who was once ridiculed for reaching for the piano had transformed not only her life but the lives of those who listened to her music. Her talent had taken them by surprise, but it was her courage, determination, and love for music that left a lasting impact. She had discovered that true success is measured not by applause, but by the ability to share your heart, touch lives, and stay true to yourself. Even years later, she would remember that first day on the school stage, the laughter, the doubts, and the moment she decided to keep playing. That day had set the path for everything that followed, and every note she played was a reminder of the journey, of struggle, love, growth, and the quiet power of following your passion no matter what others might say. Her music had become her voice, her connection to the world, and her way of honoring the memory of the one who had first introduced her to it. She knew that whatever challenges came next, she could face them with courage, humility, and the unwavering determination to let her heart be heard through every note. And in the end, that is what truly mattered.